Geordies, what a weird game of football. What a weird performance, because we were shocking. Brighton was shocking, and probably 1-1 is probably a fair result, but I'll take it because we did not look like we were going to score. We did not look like we were going to come away with anything in that game, so I'll happily take a 1-1. But I want to talk about the game, talk about some individual performances, and just how I feel about our performance in general. And I feel like if we perform like that for the rest of the season, we're not getting Champions League football. I thought we started quite well, kept the ball well, we moved the ball well, we were very confident, composed, in possession, and then we tailed off after 25 minutes, especially after Brighton scored, and then we started making mistakes. We started misplacing passes, we weren't taking care of the ball. We were our own worst enemy today because Brighton did nothing to be leading at half time. We managed to put ourselves in good positions in that first half and in the second half, but we lacked that killer final ball. We're under-hitting passes, over-hitting passes, making the wrong decisions. Final third is where we let ourselves down today. We weren't brilliant. I'm not saying we were, because we were terrible, but Brighton were just a little bit worse than us, in my opinion. Our off-ball defensive shape was quite good, in my opinion. We're set up in a 4-5-1. Usually we set up in a 5-4-1, and we're set up in a 4-5-1 to cancel out Brighton's ability to play through the lines and dominate midfield. So we really didn't let them have control of the ball, and that's seen in the statistics. We had more passes, we had more possession. Yes, we didn't really do much with the possession, but at least we nullified exactly what Brighton were trying to do. We were happy for Brighton to have possession along their back line. As soon as they entered the midfield or the halfway line, that triggered us to press and try and win the ball back. So we were quite disciplined in our defensive shape, and it just didn't allow Brighton to create anything or play through the lines. Having said that, I really don't like the balance of our midfield with Joe Willock in there. The lack of physicality that we usually have wasn't there. There was no aggression. There was no intensity. I'm really disappointed with how everything came out in that game. Everything seemed half-hearted, and I still think if it wasn't for the penalty, we could have been there for another year and we probably wouldn't have scored a goal. I thought Newcastle were going to let us down on my birthday. All I asked for on my birthday was 3 points, but I'll happily take 1 point considering how poor we were. I thought Isak was not getting any service, so he started dropping into midfield, trying to get on the ball. He was really non-existent in that game, despite his penalty. Isak's at his devastating best when he's running in behind. We did none of that today. There was no movement. In fact, I think we were quite surprised at Brighton's shape because they defended a lot deeper than what they would normally, and I think they did that to nullify the threat of our runs in behind. But it's up to us to create that movement, to create that space to run into. We need a lot more rotation in the final third to create openings, and it just wasn't there. We're very static, we're very lackluster, and we just didn't really have that intensity that we normally have. And I always say this, I don't mind losing games. Well, in fact, in this, drawing games. When you take risks, when you try and win the game of football, when you play a pass but get dispossessed, or your winger tries to take on a man and get dispossessed, I don't mind that. When I do get annoyed is when there's a lack of effort, a lack of belief, and it felt like we weren't present today. It felt like we were going through the motions. We didn't have the intensity that Newcastle United normally have. And I think today showed the importance of Joe Linton. He does well in triggering our press. He anticipates play, really suffocates the opposition. He triggers everything we do off the ball. And I think we lacked that today. Then after the first half, I was thinking, it can't get any worse. It really can't get any worse. And then we came out in the second half and we were misplacing passes. Sandro Tonali not being himself. He was misplacing passes. Bruno was doing the same. Joe Willock was doing the same. And I was just thinking, does anybody want to win this game? And then I thought, when Anthony Gordon came on, he instantly made an impact, made a difference. He looked fresh. He looked sharp. He was being direct. And that's exactly what we lacked in the first half. And one thing I will say on the substitutions, I want to see William Masula being given an opportunity before Callum Wilson. I think he should be the one coming on as a substitute over Callum Wilson. I think he's going to offer you more. He's going to give you that fearless nature, that youthful exuberance. He's got the pace. He's got the power to run in behind, and he can just cause more of a threat than what Callum Wilson does. I understand Callum Wilson's got the experience, but sometimes in a game like that, it's better to have lack of experience because you just play off the cuff, you play on instincts. And I think we've seen it against Ipswich. He's got that ability to score headers. He's got that ability to create something out of nothing. He's got that ability to get on the end of chances, and we were putting in a lot of crosses, and I'm more confident William Nasula getting on the end of them than I am Callum Wilson. That's just my opinion. I just think every time he's been given an opportunity, he's actually performed for us. So we need to see it more and more again. We need to look more towards the future than the past, and Callum Wilson's certainly the past, in my opinion. The frustrating thing about this game was Brighton were there to be beaten. They weren't great at all today. They didn't create much. They weren't good on the ball. But we weren't much better and didn't really take the game to them. There was no standout performers for Newcastle United today. We just really weren't ourselves. So I'm happy that we went there. As long what I said in my preview, if you play badly, make sure you don't lose a game. Make sure you come away with something, because every point in this Champions League running race matters. So I'm quite happy that we showed a little bit of resilience and come away with a point. Look, we went the Amex. We don't have a good record there. We've never won there in the Premier League. Just make sure you don't lose the game. But we've only got ourselves to blame today because we weren't great. But Brighton, I'm frustrated because they were there to be beaten. So this is the league table as it stands, and we're 3 points ahead of Chelsea and Forest, but they both got a great game in hand. Chelsea play Liverpool later on today, and I actually think they're going to win that game. I don't think Liverpool have anything to play for, and I don't think they'll play with the intensity that they usually do. Chelsea have picked up recently, but our game against Chelsea is going to be absolutely monumental. But you've got to remember the last day of the season, Chelsea play Forest as well. So we've got them to take points off each other. Now, Aston Villa have an opportunity because we play Chelsea, but also Chelsea play Forest. So somebody's going to drop points. So that's a great opportunity for Aston Villa to at least leapfrog one, maybe two of them. But as long as we just win our games of football, we get Champions League football, in my opinion. If we beat Chelsea, that is absolutely huge at St. James's Park. We get Champions League football, and that's all that matters this season. It's not about the performances now. Just win your games of football. And if you can't win your games of football, make sure you don't lose your games of football. So I want to look at a few things that I was talking about, our press and just opportunities that were missed in trying to get in behind Brighton. So this was our press, and you can clearly see the bank of five midfielders. So this allowed us to really control the middle of the pitch. So we did this so Brighton couldn't play through the lines. But I want to talk about Brighton's goal because this was so avoidable. We've got the overload here. Sandro Tonali and Tino. Now what Tino needs to do in this situation is close the space, because the moment you allow Minter to gather momentum, he takes control of the situation and he can manipulate Tino into any way he wants. Now it was brilliant from Minter. Let's be honest. He took this goal superbly. The little shimmy and then shimmy again to get away from Sandro Tonali. Then he puts it in the top corner. Moment of brilliance. And it was always going to be a moment of brilliance to score from open play because neither side created handful or good opportunities. So it was a moment of brilliance from Minter. But Tino has to close the space because the moment he allows Minter to gather any momentum and really get into his step count when he's dribbling the ball, that's the moment he takes control of the situation. And we're seeing that happen. So I'm sure Tino is going to learn from this. But what also needs to happen in this situation, Sandro Tonali needs to double up with Tino. The sooner he closes a space, that just doesn't allow Minter to gather any momentum. Now what happens is Minter drives forward, which forces Tino backwards. And then once Tino's off balance, he steps inside. So he does the step count of Minter is brilliant just to open up a yard of space, but it shouldn't happen in that situation. But we did actually find ourselves in promising situations. And look at this, we should be scoring from this opportunity, but the final ball once again let us down. This is Joe Willock at his best when there's room to run in. Who actually said before this game that this game would suit Joe Willock better than Ipswich because he would have room to run into. Now, Brighton defended, surprisingly, they defended a lot deeper than what they would normally. So there wasn't as much room, but at times we did manage to get him behind. And same with Jacob Murphy, but again, just lacking that conviction in the final third. But we get ourselves into good positions, but we don't capitalise on it. And I want Alexander Isak to be a bit more aggressive in the box. I think that's one thing he's lacking, just a little bit of aggression. What do you think Shearer would do in this situation? No matter who was in front of him, he would try and get in front of his man. Alexander Isak needs to try and get in front of those players because that's exactly where the ball goes. Because if he doesn't, he's going to be second best to the goal. So I just want to see a little bit more aggression from Alexander Isak when he's in the 6-yard box. So he has the statistics from the game. And even though we weren't great, we were the better side. Brighton was so poor. I didn't expect that performance from Brighton. But we had a better XG. We had more shots. Their keeper pulled off more saves. We had more passes. We had more percentage of the play. We were far superior to Brighton today, even though we were terrible in ourselves. But like I mentioned earlier, as long as you don't win, if you can't win the game of football, make sure you don't lose a game of football. And I'm going to leave this on the screen for you while I'm finishing up because, again, I thought we were poor today. Thought Sandro Tonali wasn't at it. I didn't think our back four was at it. Tino was off it. Trippier was off it. Bruno was off it. Joe Willock didn't look very good. Alexander Isak looked non-existent up until the penalty. Jacob Murphy had an off day. Harvey Barnes wasn't great. I just think all round it was just collectively just a bad day at the office. And I hope we just leave it as a bad day at the office, even though we've come away with a point, which I probably would have taken before the game if you had offered us it. It's still, I just want to see a bit of a better performance. Hopefully that's just a one-off, because inconsistencies throughout the season is going to happen. You're going to have games where you're just not at it. And hopefully from now to the end of the season, this is that game that we're just not at it. And then when we come up against Chelsea and we've got Arsenal away, we've got Everton at home, we're right back at it. Hopefully this performance is give us a kick up the backside to think we need to up our game here. That's what I'm hoping to take away from this performance. But we've got to be better against Chelsea, Arsenal and Everton, because if not, we'll be found out. So that's all I've got to say on today's game. I think it's one of those games where you just turn up, get a point, forget about it, we'll move on to the next one, because as long as if we continue to dwell on that performance, really overthink it, it can really affect us going into the next 3 games. 3 games or 3 cup finals. We've got a huge opportunity to get into Champions League football. It's still in our hands, in my opinion. So as long as we win our games of football, we get Champions League football. But I want to hear your thoughts. What did you make of that game? Or do you agree with me? Were you as disappointed as me? Because I was really disappointed. Even though we came away with a point, I was just, the performance in general really disappointed us. Let me know your thoughts in the below. And is any player, what would you do against Chelsea? Would you bring in Miley or would you keep Joe Willock in this side? Let me know your thoughts in the below. Don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. And until next time, away the lads.